Good evening, and welcome to tonight's hustings, hosted by Hope for the Future and Green Alliance, as Robbie's just said. So my name's Sarah, and I'm the director of Hope for the Future, which is a Sheffield-based climate change charity. And we support communities and individuals across the UK to have more effective conversations and relationships with their elected representatives on climate change. So we believe that the climate and nature crises should be at the heart of every election, and that includes the upcoming Metro Mayor election for South Yorkshire. This evening will be an opportunity for the candidates here to hear what matters to their constituents, that's you, as well as your opportunity to hear the role that they will play in the UK's efforts to decarbonise. So in 2019, South Yorkshire's incumbent Mayor, Dan Jarvis, declared a climate emergency in South Yorkshire and set a target for the region to reach net zero by 2040. Dan Jarvis is stepping down as Mayor, so will be replaced by one of the candidates who is running for the election on May the 5th. So in a moment, we'll hear opening remarks from each of the candidates on why they feel it's important for South Yorkshire to reach net zero by 2040. We'll then go on to have a discussion about 4 key areas of decarbonisation: clean energy, tackling the cost of living through a green economy, green transport, and the environmental benefits of decarbonising South Yorkshire. So each theme will have around 15 minutes, and we'll be welcoming questions and comments from all of you in the audience. So please do contribute with any thoughts or questions that you might have. So we're not only in person tonight, we do have an audience online, and my colleagues Aaron and Will are going to be helping out with feeding any questions from the online audience into the room this evening. So yeah, if you're watching online, please do submit your questions. And we'll also have some pre-submitted questions from a South Yorkshire Youth Forum shared by my colleague Rosie as well. So now, over to our candidates. As Robbie said, we did invite all the candidates this evening, but unfortunately, not all were able to attend, but I do have some comments from Clive Watkinson, which I'll read out for each of the sections. But we do have with us today, as Robbie has already introduced, Bex Whyman for the Green Party, Oliver Coppard for Labour, Joe Otten for the Liberal Democrats, and Simon Biltcliffe for the Yorkshire Party. So, handing over to each of you, and maybe we could start with Bex and kind of go down the line. In a minute and a half, and I will try and keep you to time as best as I can, please could each of you tell us in your own words why it's important for South Yorkshire to reach net zero by 2040. Over to you, Bex.
Thanks, Sarah. Can I just check where the camera is that's being recorded so I know where to, up at the top? Lovely. Just so that I can talk to the people on the, and be inclusive. So yeah, thanks, Sarah. So I'm Bex Whyman, and as part of the, I've seen the camera now, it should be pretty evident the fact that I'm part of the Green Party, that I think it's absolutely necessary that we reduce net zero by 2050. And there are so many steps that we can take in order to get us there. But the reason that I think it's really important to do that is to ensure that on a sort of local scale, we are protected. So we can only need to look at the flooding that happened in 2019 to know that we are actually at risk. Our people's livelihoods are taken into account, and actual people's lives in itself as well. So this is not a problem that is hidden. It is something that's already happening, and we need to take some real action immediately to start reducing our carbon footprint. It's not only a problem with on a local level. Obviously, it's a global problem. So we absolutely need to work together with all of South Yorkshire for a start. Let's start with South Yorkshire and work with the whole globe. We also need to think about how we can potentially wean ourselves off the actual energy that we're using at the moment. And a way to do that is to retrofit our homes, ultimately. Oh, sorry, yeah, I ramble.
Great, thank you, Bex. Great, thank you. Oliver.
Thank you. So I realised the question that we were asked to prepare as candidates was, why is it important for South Yorkshire to reach net zero by 2040? And if you don't mind, I kind of feel like with this audience in particular, that's not necessarily a question that I'm going to need to spend 90 seconds on. If you guys in this room don't believe that it is important for us to reach net zero by 2040, I think we're kind of done for, aren't we? For me, the important thing is not why we get there, it's how we get there now. Right? How do we get there? And the good news is that this is no longer a technical challenge. Us getting to net zero by 2040 is not something that technically we don't know how to do. When it comes to homes, when it comes to cars, when it comes to getting about our region, when it comes to powering our businesses, we know how to do that. The challenge we face is how we do this politically. Politically, how do we get to a place where as a region and as a country and then globally we can get to net zero and frankly save our planet? So for me tonight, what I hope we're going to hear is how the people on this panel are going to do that. And the good news again is that I think probably what you're going to hear is a huge amount of agreement and people actually trying to compete with each other to be the greenest candidate. And I think that's only for the good, frankly. So I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you very much for being here too. And I hope we can have a really great discussion about how we get to net zero, not just why.
Brilliant. Thanks, Oliver. Joan.
As Mike, danger of violence agreement here. I think I'm really pleased that we've got a the group calling this meeting is called Hope for the Future. I'm so pleased that we're seeing this and approaching this with a spirit of hope. When there's a lot of kind of despair out there that we'll ever do it. I think it's entirely achievable. And the question, as Oliver says, is political. It's not really whether South Yorkshire can do it. It's whether the whole world can get to net zero. And South Yorkshire is going to do it because we're not freeloaders. We're not going to let the rest of the world do it, and we're not going to do it. So, but it's important for the world. And to answer the question, why is it important? Well, if don't take my word for it. Go to the IPCC. They've published pages and pages, so much research that you could spend a lifetime reading it. But it says that if we when we get to 1.5 degrees warming, the effects will be worse, and the risks of large and irreversible changes will be worse. When we get to 2 degrees, they'll be larger and worse again. If we go beyond 2 degrees, none of these numbers are magic. None of these numbers are magic. The hotter it gets, the worse it's going to be, and the slower we take to reverse it, the worse it's going to be. So that's why it's important. And South Yorkshire is not the best place in the world in terms of the progress we've made, but it's not the worst. And the UK is not the best in the world, but it's not the worst. There's a range. Even China. Even people say, well, let's give up because China, we can never change China. China is better than average at its renewable energy generation. Let's bear that in mind. There is will across the whole world to do this, and we can do this, and I believe we will do it. So there we go.
Thanks, Joe. Simon.
Hi there. I'm delighted to be here, and of course, it's common sense, to be brutally honest, that we need to rein in climate change. Capitalism isn't very good at doing this. I run a Marxist capitalist business, and that's one which has created wealth, because wealth is very important for everybody to have a reasonable standard of living, but then builds in the externalities that capitalism doesn't take into account. So we've been carbon neutral as a business since 2015. We've planted 13,500 trees as a business. And it shows that enlightened businesses can actually drive the change as well as governments. Governments are really important, but so is private enterprise. And as the Yorkshire Party is for a strongly devolved regional parliament for Yorkshire, I think we've got a great opportunity to make a big step forward at a Yorkshire-wide level as well as a South Yorkshire level. If you look at the last energy transition where we went from coal in this region and steel, we lost that one. We now, as a region, have an opportunity to win the next one. We have some of the leading green companies in this region. And I think it's absolutely paramount that we are a world exemplar in this transition from the old style of manufacturing through to the new green tech opportunities that are out there. And I think we have a unique history and heritage, and that transition through to a new green economy is something that we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity here in South Yorkshire. And as South Yorkshire Mayor, that will be absolutely forefront of my tenure here. Hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Great, so we're going to move on to the first of our 4 themes, and the first theme is clean energy. So before I pose the first question to the candidates, I'm just going to read the kind of contribution from the Conservative candidate, who said that, "I believe that the secret to getting people to change to cleaner energy is an encouragement in convincing them that it is to their economic benefit. Not everyone buys into climate change, but everyone likes to save money. For example, in my own business, we've installed air source heat pumps and installed these over a decade ago before net zero became fashionable, and they've been excellent and saved a lot of money. The problem is that the initial cost is expensive, and both businesses and individuals think too short term. We should therefore offer interest-free loans to encourage take-up of these proven technologies." So interest-free loans is what he is suggesting. So the question to the candidates this evening is, what are your plans to scale up clean energy across South Yorkshire? So Bex, you've said that you want to see an insulated Britain, more clean renewable energy, and absolutely no fracking. So could you kick us off with a bit more detail on your plans?
Absolutely. And I'll say that again, absolutely no fracking. We have to keep the fossil fuels that are in the ground. So that will absolutely be an absolute no-go for me. So clean energy, and I think what was mentioned earlier about plans to scale up and at speed actually is really important. So I've got some plans on tackling this around housing actually, because there's a big need for improved housing and the way that the energy is generated within our homes. So ultimately, it's a 3-pronged approach with that, with wall insulation, heat pumps and solar panels. And actually, I was on the bus down today, I was having a chat with George Price. I don't know if he's managed to get in the audience or not, but he basically was talking to me about heat pumps. And he's doing a dissertation on how heat pumps are used. So I've taken his details and we're going to have a lot of exchange over that. But ultimately, it's not a one-size-fits-all. It's not a one solution that's going to, be something that fits it. And it's actually not an easy thing to do. But ultimately, with the technology that we've already got in things like Energy Sprong, which has been used in the Netherlands and in France and in Germany, we can actually bring that into our community and use local communities where you build modular insulation of homes ultimately. So we reduce the need for that energy in the first place. So not only about making the energy that we use cleaner with the use of solar, wind, hydro, and green hydro rather than the blue. So what that basically means is it's all made from renewable energy rather than any fossil fuels that are already in the ground. So ultimately, using all that technology that's already there, we can pull that and bring that to speed. There are warehouses in Hellaby and Rotherham at the moment that are sat there just underused. I know that because I lived across from them, and ultimately they were just stagnant. We can absolutely make our community and our county a place for a new industry, and that industry is about green energy.
Great. Thank you, Bex. And Oliver, you've talked about a clean energy strategy. So what would your priorities within that be?
Excuse me, sorry. Yeah, okay, thank you. So I'll start off by saying, for not everybody, I assume, has read my manifesto cover to cover, but there's still time. In the manifesto, we have committed to a clean energy strategy for South Yorkshire, which is of, I think, fundamental importance, and I think we agree on that. We have, in this region, the opportunity to be leaders when it comes to particularly wind and solar, of course, and the clean energy strategy, I'm not going to prejudge, actually, if you don't mind, what goes in there, because frankly that's for experts to decide how we do it, but it's fundamentally important that we do, and we've got the options to do that in front of us now already. I know that because I used to work running something called the Dearne Valley Ecovision, which was a strategy or a plan in the Dearne Valley, what was once the most polluted place in Western Europe, and our plan was to turn that into the lowest carbon community of its type in the country. And once you start looking for those options and those opportunities, they're right there. So we developed a dam at Thriber. We were looking at mine water heating schemes. I think there are 4 mine water heating schemes planned for South Yorkshire now. So these options are in front of us. We just need to grasp that nettle. I just want to say something about the Tory candidate, and I'm not going to do this all night because it doesn't help anybody or anything, just sort of hammering other people. But look, I do think what's frustrating to me is we had an energy strategy from this government, the Tory government, and in there they talked about things that we might be able to do in 20 years' time. We can do this now, right? We can do this now. The other thing they didn't mention in there, they talked a lot about supply of energy. They didn't talk at all about demand, right? And cutting down on demand for energy is just as, if not more important. So we said in the manifesto we'll also have a retrofit task force, and that retrofit task force will be charged with making sure that we bring down the demand for energy in South Yorkshire as well. So it's both supply and demand. Both of those things are in our manifesto, and frankly we just need to crack on with it.
Great, thanks Oliver. So Oliver's going to leave the prioritising up to the experts. What do you think, Joe?
Well, yeah, I mean, in local government, we always have strategies about everything, and some of the strategies lead to action, some don't. So, I mean, I hope this one, if it happens, will. The challenge here is that, of course, the big decisions about energy are made in government and not in the city, region, or in local government. And so, look, we need to generate a lot more renewables. We need to generate more, in my view, more nuclear. And we need to cut out the fossil fuels, and it's that simple, and it's not difficult to do, and it can be done, but it's a policy decision from elsewhere. What we can do, and what the South Yorkshire, the city region as it was designed to be, is a tool of economic regeneration, because it's business support, it's skills, housing, transport. Those are the levers that we have, and we can use that to pull the levers to make the new green economy, rather than just regeneration kind of in the old business as usual kind of way. And so skills means skills in home insulation. Business support means business support for businesses that are part of the green economy. Housing means, as has been said by the other candidates, and I agree, housing that is good energy efficiency standards. So that's what we can do with the Mayor's office in South Yorkshire, and that's what we should do. And transport as well, I'm sure we'll come to.
Thanks, Joe. What about you, Simon?
I think we have got a bigger role to play than the regional role that we've got and the direct powers that we've got. We have got what's called soft power. We can be very strong and influential. We have got one of the world's leading green hydrogen producers right here in Sheffield already. And if we bring to the fore the wonderful things that are happening already in South Yorkshire, it'll reframe our area as a green transition economy. And that will bring in an awful lot of investment. I mean, obviously we've got the AMRC here for advanced manufacturing. A lot of that is to do with frugal manufacturing, additive, 3D printing, and all of this kind of thing. And if you bring that together with the green economy, we in the Yorkshire Party are looking for a green technical college to be established here, which will help with the retraining. We have got, everybody is going to have to transition in every industry. The good news is there is a wonderful opportunity if you do. There is more jobs in the green economy than there has ever been before. We've got a lot of bright young people coming in and out of the universities here. We want to keep them here. We want to keep that talent here and that innovation here. And there's a big area in my manifesto about all of these areas. So I think, if you look at it as an opportunity, we are in absolutely the right place in South Yorkshire if we frame the approach to economic development, to household living, to making sure that we do ensure that we have some of the best environmentally friendly housing in Europe. We have already got some going up, but bringing that to the form, giving people the opportunities to do that, and looking at the circular economy as well. If you look at Denmark, for example, 97% of cans and things like that are recycled. Down here it's less than 20%. You know, and these whole new opportunity to use less, but by recycling and upcycling things, that is a whole new economy that we can do here in South Yorkshire. So to me, it's a reinvention. It's Phoenix-like, coming out of the old industrial region that we're known for into a much greener, brighter and more prosperous future. And that's what I would stand for as South Yorkshire Mayor.
Great. Let's hear from our audience. Does anyone have any questions or comments, particularly on clean energy? So we've got an online question. So Aaron.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah, I can hear my own voice. So this is from Dave Dickinson on the Zoom link. So will you be working to create opportunities for people to invest in renewable energy projects in South Yorkshire, either directly through the council or with crowdfunding companies like Abundant Investment?
On that one, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely the mayor's office, the mayor's job to support businesses, and like I say, in particular, renewable energy businesses. I don't think the right way to do that is to have the mayor directly or the local council directly investing it. It's been tried. It's tried in Nottingham. It was tried in Bristol, and these businesses went bust and lost tens of millions of pounds because I think because that was the wrong model. So yes, absolutely, we should support it, but the people who know how to do it and the local communities who are motivated to do it are going to do a better job.
Oliver, do you agree with that?
Not entirely, but look, I think the thing that I would focus on when you talk about this stuff, in our manifesto we've talked about municipal bonds as one way that we could fund environmental projects. I think there's a whole load of financial mechanisms, and the finance is at the heart of this, let's be honest. In the Retrofit task force that we've talked about, a big part of that and how you do that well and effectively is by getting the finance right. And if you get the finance right, the rest of it flows. So there are a bunch of different financial mechanisms that you can use to get that right, not least, like I say, municipal bonds, which allow people to buy in. Equally, though, I think we should be looking at things like ESG finance, so we can get more money into our region in order to solve some of these problems. And there are obviously, I mean, they get a name check at every one of these that I've ever done, but you know, Sheffield Renewables and the work that they do shouldn't be forgotten either, because that model works at scale too. So we should be trying to replicate that at a region-wide scale.
Bex?
Thank you. I think I would support actually investment into renewable companies, and I'm going to take it a little bit off piece. Maybe it'd be a bit like Dragon's Den. When you get the right advisors giving advice, you could actually work in partnership with people. So offer some investment, but actually offer partnership as well. And the Green Party have so many advisors that could actually work to our advantage. And what I hope to bring to this role, rather than is actually more of a business sense towards the role. So ultimately looking at areas such as in investment, but also in partnership. So actually supporting people when you give the investment out as well, and the advice needed. And in the manifesto as well that we've got out there, there's a big piece that I've completely forgotten about to do with finance. So there we go and read it.
You're a businessman, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I was, a bit loud, sorry about that. I was sat in a table in Sheffield, and around that table was people representing £3 billion of investment. And it's incredible. There is no shortage of money for this, but you need clear direction. You need clear understanding of a long-term vision, and that comes from, obviously, locally, but nationally and internationally as well. One of the things that I strongly believe in is a carbon tax. I think if you're trying to actually change the way that we if you like, interact with nature and our planet, you have to bring a carbon tax in, because then it makes everything sensible in terms of long-term investment trajectories. And if you look at scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions, then with a carbon tax, you will drive all the right things that you want in business and in household expenditure, but with the right amount of support from government as well. So it is a money thing, but and the government has an opportunity, like with hydrogen, to pump prime that which they're doing, give them the due. They're doing basically they're subsidising the price that it costs to make it at the moment with the price they can get it for, which is green hydrogen competing with blue hydrogen, and they're paying the difference to the manufacturers. And rather like solar, which has dropped the price in 10 years 80%, wind has done the same. This is where there is a great opportunity now for us here to harness that opportunity for everybody in South Yorkshire to build a very much brighter economy going forward.
Great, thank you. Any more questions or comments from, yes, Maddie at the front here.
Hiya, thank you. You've mentioned one of the barriers to clean energy deployment as finance, but there's a big elephant in the room of planning, like you're talking about onshore wind. What would you all do about planning in South Yorkshire to get more wind turbines and more fields of solar panels out there powering us all?
Good question. Oliver, should we come to you first?
Yeah, sure. It is a really good question. It's about ownership, I think. So it does relate to the finance, I think. So, you know, the government have said this, I think, pretty half-heartedly, if I'm honest, and they're going to try and put roadblocks in the way. But what you find is when people benefit from the infrastructure that is built around them, they're actually really quite supportive of that infrastructure. So the wind turbines that we see in places like Mar can give back to those local communities. I personally think wind turbines are pretty statuesque and beautiful, but I realise not everybody feels the same way. But if you get those wind turbines giving energy, cheaper energy to the communities around them, actually they see the benefit. And I do think this is about a regional strategy for energy, because if you can get this right, you can have people owning the means of production around them, and therefore benefiting from wind turbines, mine water heating, solar panels, etc. It's why models like Sheffield Renewables are so powerful, because people own it. So for me, it's about making sure that people have that model and can own the infrastructure so that they can actually benefit, and therefore I think the support comes, and therefore planning can follow.
Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair point. I think the problem here, the planning is a local authority area, and the problem we've had in Sheffield is that the local plan has been, has been in development for a decade now, and we're at risk of in Sheffield not being able to refuse inappropriate proposals to development because we haven't got the housing land supply required, and we can't bring in up-to-date policies on things like renewable energy and energy efficiency. I mean, in my ward in Dorn-Totley, the Willow Hall Farm was wanting to put a load of solar panels up as part of their site, as part of their education provision, and it was refused by planning officers. I mean, I was absolutely shocked, but that's where we are. That's where the policy stands at the moment.
I think there is, from my point of view, a lot of it's education. There is actually quite an opportunity to put up solar in particular and low wind turbines without an awful lot of planning, but not at an industrial scale. We've got 108 solar panels on our office and have done now for 12 years. And a lot of people didn't realise you could just put them on. And so I think there's an education piece here, and getting people, at all generations to be aware of what an impact at a small scale it can have at a big scale. At individual household level, the difference that you can make is quite significant. So yes, we would like to change planning at a national level. Certainly offshore that has changed, and that's going to be scaled up significantly. But within our area, there is a lot that we can do, and a lot of it is down to explaining to people what the opportunity is and showing case studies of what it can be done. And whenever we bring people around, all of them are looked into because of the cost of living crisis for individuals and companies. So I think there's a lot more we can do, and that, if you like, that publicity about it, it would be something that as South Yorkshire Mayor I would very strongly promote.
Thank you. I think that we need to look at policy and understanding. So I agree with the sort of education piece there, Simon, and I think that ultimately, why are we building new homes now without solar panels? Why? I do not understand that. I talked to a chap that's building, I lived in a bungalow recently, and they're knocking that down and building 2 semi-detached houses. And I asked, oh, maybe I'd be interested in actually buying one of those. What green provisions have you got that you have to, adhere to as far as policy? Oh, nothing, really. So what I don't understand is why we're not doing that right now. So that's one of the first things that I would do, is actually address the policies in place and make it so that you cannot build a new home without solar panels on the roofs. And the other piece is about how we redefine what we class as industry. So in Hellaby, where I moved from, there's a big field that used to be for agriculture. It's been earmarked in the Rotherham local plan for industry. So why don't we just say industry is actually having solar panels on that field? We can class that as industry, surely. And then it's generating our renewable energy. So I think there's a different way of thinking around things rather than it being ultimately, we need to move with the times, basically, and we're not doing that right now.
Thanks, Bex. Great. We'll come to our youth question before we move on to the next theme. So over to Rosie.
Thank you. Oh, this microphone is working. Fantastic. So this question isn't from me. This has been submitted by a group of young people who I work with in my role at Hope for the Future, called the Regional Youth Climate Assembly, so RYCA. So these questions I'm going to be reading out through the event are from the young people aged 18 and below who are members of RYCA. And the question that they had about clean energy and green energy to all of the candidates is, how are you going to help young people specifically switch to clean energy? And I think what they might be really interested in here are the specific issues of enabling schools and colleges and other institutions that young people engage with to switch to clean energy.
Thank you, Rosie. Simon, maybe we could start with you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously young people are our future, and they come preloaded with quite a lot of environmental credentials, which is fantastic. And I think there's an education that they can teach to the rest of us. I mean, the schools and generally haven't been overburdened with environmentally friendly kind of ways of heating and things like that. So I think there's a piece of work to be done there in terms of looking at their local environment and seeing what, as a project. I mean, I went to XP Academy in Doncaster, which is a fabulous school, and they teach in thematic areas, in projects, effectively, and then they'll cover the whole curriculum off in a look at every aspect of it, for environmental, social, and so on. And I think if we can change the way that we look at the environment as just being a thing in its own, it isn't. It's integrated with everything that we do, what we eat, how we travel around, our habits, our hobbies and things like that. So I think for me, it's giving them the opportunity to actually make a material impact to their living surroundings would be a very good starting point. And I mentioned before the Green Technical College, getting a green environmental pathway. If you're looking at social mobility, the one thing that anybody needs who comes from a lower socioeconomic kind of strata is the opportunity. And having pathways into a really clear opportunity into the green economy would be fantastic. And that's where that Green Energy Technical College, I think, is a really big step forward for the region.
Great. Bex, maybe we could come to you next.
Sure, yeah. I think maybe, why don't we start a scheme on some competition to get schools competing about who can be the best, cleanest use of energy centres. I know through working in colleges, through the business analysis that I do, Sheffield College is a really good example of trying to be as green as possible, but actually not hitting the mark, because what they ended up doing was putting up some wind turbines on the top of their college, which, brilliant idea, absolutely fantastic. What I'd love to see is some more advice given, and maybe a training centre to see how you go about doing that, because actually they fit them too high up, so they can't have them on all the time. So ultimately, just having more education around the best way to fit green energy spaces, I think would be really advantageous. And then let's get that really nice sort of competition going as well between our schools.
Great idea. Joe?
Thanks. Yeah, I'm going to disagree slightly with the premise of the question. I think the goal should be to be energy efficient. That is the thing that to challenge your school to do, and to see what you could do in your home and in the rest of your life. And being energy efficient is how you're going to reduce your carbon impact. And yes, put solar panels on your roof if you can. That's great. But if switching to clean energy means things like green tariffs, I'm actually sceptical that that's a real thing. I mean, obviously it's a real thing. They exist. As a concept that was designed to boost renewable generation, I don't think it's worked. I think there's plenty more renewable generation going on than there are people on green tariffs buying that energy. So you're not really increasing the total quantum of it. And somebody asked me, and it's a great question, why is it, if gas has gone up so much in its cost, why is my green tariff now not cheaper than the people who are paying for electricity generated with gas? And of course it isn't any cheaper, that saving hasn't come through. So and there are complicated reasons for that, which I won't go into, but I think it's a good illustration of, actually, maybe the green tariffs are not actually a useful thing, and we need to be just generating more renewables by policy and being energy efficient.
And where do young people come into that?
So I mean, the school example was a good one. I think schools already run. I certainly my daughter's primary school had won a green flag for its energy. So it was solar panels and it was various other things. So that's a great thing. We need to do more of that. I think schools are already actually pretty good. A lot of schools are doing embracing the agenda and getting on with it, and we need to be learning from them perhaps how best to do it, rather than trying to tell them how to do it.
Oliver.
Thank you. I think there are two sides to it. There's the demand-led side and the ownership side. So in terms of young people, advocating for change, which it sounds like you've got a handle on. I just want to sort of come back to a comment that Simon made, which is just that young people come preloaded with this sort of knowledge about the environment. And actually, I'm not sure that's true. I think that actually young people are just learning faster and being taught why this is so important. So, Joe talks about the Green Flag Scheme. Most people here won't know, but in the Dearne Valley, we had the largest eco-schools programme in the country. We had 200 schools across the region supporting that programme, and it was fab. It was brilliant, and we need more of that. And the second bit of that is about ownership. And again, schools have property, they have land, they have roofs. So we need to get the financing right and the models right when it comes to how schools can own the benefit that comes with having renewable energy infrastructure planted on their land. So on both of those sides, I think we need to get that right in order to get young people more involved.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to move on to our next theme, which is around tackling the cost of living through a green economy. So as we all know, we are experiencing a cost of living crisis at the moment, and inflation is currently at a 30-year high. And as reports by Green Alliance and others have shown, holding back on climate action will raise the cost of living even higher. So I'm going to ask the candidates what they will do to cut carbon now and support households struggling to make ends meet. I will read the Conservative candidate's contribution to this, who said that although the initial costs of becoming greener are large, the medium-term savings are significant. We also need to lead in green technology, and for example, Barnsley College is already doing this. The current cost of living crisis is devastating for both individuals and businesses. There's little we can do about it in the short term, as two key factors are the energy costs and shipping costs, both of which are global problems and actually affect other countries even more than the UK. The good news is that these are short-term problems and will be resolved before too long. The important thing is to learn from the situation and not allow it to happen again. By investing in renewables and nuclear and moving towards electric transportation, we will be less dependent on international fuel prices. By moving manufacturing back from the Far East, we will be less dependent on rip-off shipping costs. So my question, as I said, was what will you do to cut carbon now and support households struggling to make ends meet? So Joe, you have pledged to deliver warmer homes, and you've talked a bit about that already. So how do you plan to do that?
Oh, right, thank you. So the original question, I mean, there is some housing powers with the South Yorkshire Mayor, not as many as some of the other mayors. So that limits obviously what can be done. But where there is that influence and that power and there is some money, absolutely it has to go towards more energy efficient homes and homes on brownfield sites in places with good transport links and good amenities, so we can kind of build these 15-minute neighbourhoods where people can get about easily and get about by active travel if they can. Most of the answer to the question is kind of outside of the powers of the mayor. There's the transport as well we're going to come to. I'd just like to actually remind us what happened last time we had an energy crisis during the coalition. There was suddenly a lot of pressure from Conservative backbenchers to cut out the, quote, green crap, unquote, from the energy bills. And what was the green crap? Well, it was the green crap that gave us a tripling of renewable energy, which I think we've got to say is serving us well now in terms of the cost of energy today. And there were measures like there's the warmer homes element to that, which is directly money off bills for the poorest communities in the country, from poorest families in the country, which was precisely about fairly sharing the burden of green energy, so the poorest in our community weren't paying for it, but those of us with the broadest shoulders, those of us who could afford it, were paying for it. And I think that's the kind of policy we need to see.
Okay, thank you. Simon, I know you've talked about the tiny house movement. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's not directly related to cost of living crisis, but that's more of a different approach to the housing requirements that we need, but they are generally, there are ways of getting on brownfield sites a lot more houses and of a high quality and very thermally efficient, which give a really good quality of life to people and make it affordable. Going back to the question about the cost of living crisis, there's an awful lot that people could do if they knew about it. There's lots of different schemes out there. So, for example, it's called HUGs. Any household with under £30,000 of income can get a free air source heat pump. Now, a lot of people don't know about this. So, South Yorkshire Mayor, bringing to the fore these opportunities that are out there is really important. I would look to develop a cost audit for households to do. There's loads of tools out there. Most people don't know about them. You know, Lidl, for example, is one of the lowest cost supermarkets, but it's also the greenest. Its packaging is better than anybody else. So you can get, and that was through Which did a report on that. So many people don't know these kind of things. So for a South Yorkshire Mayor, it's bringing all these disparate bits together into an easy to use, if you like, calculator for households to do themselves. Also things like heat audits that some councils will offer it if you ask. If you don't know that they'll do it, it's difficult to know about that. So you literally go around with a heat camera so you can see where you're losing your heat. Not particularly important when we've got days like this, but coming in October, when we've got another 50% rise in the cost of energy, it's expected. It's really important. So bringing together a package of support that is out there and also education by making it so that it's a tool that any household can use. That certainly does tie in with the reducing the cost of living crisis and also making it greener for people.
Thank you. And Bex, you've already mentioned Energy Sprung this evening. Do you think that's a way that we could be saving households with their fuel bills?
Absolutely. I love when I found out about the technology of Energy Sprung and it being this modular thing that you can just attach onto housing, absolutely fantastic. So that's something that we can build up to. But the immediate things that we can do is actually to bring back the schemes for solar panels on homes, bring back the schemes for wall insulation. So because they have been taken away, ultimately the momentum that's been brought up to actually use those things and reduce the cost of living, typically to do with energy, has really slowed down. And I'm just going to pause for a second because I'm going to ask a question. How is this place heated at the moment? Nobody knows? Can everyone raise your hand if you're really warm? Okay. If anyone can find out how it's heated and turn the heating off, that would be brilliant, because then we can save some energy. We ultimately, wall insulation, heat pumps, solar panels, there's so much out there that we can do right now to support people in getting their bills down, or at least, bringing these schemes back to make sure we can do that.
Hopefully it's just really, really well insulated in here.
Fingers crossed.
Oliver, you've mentioned the Retrofit task force, again, as that's something that you feel will help to save energy bills for households.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think there are two sides, aren't there, to the cost of living crisis that we're all facing right now. One of those is obviously related to energy bills, and bringing down, like I say, the energy bills, the demand for energy, is both good in the aggregate because we reduce our carbon footprint, but on a personal level it means that we all have cheaper or lower fuel bills. So yes, the Retrofit task force and making sure we insulate our homes more effectively means we can reduce the cost that families are facing, because I was interested in the comment from the Conservative candidate, just because he said this is going to be a short-term problem. If you think this is a short-term problem, you're just not paying attention, frankly, because if you think bills are bad now, wait until the energy crisis ramps up, when we should not be pulling more fossil fuels out of the ground. If we don't get our act together and replace those, we're going to face a huge number of challenges. The food that we eat is going to go up in cost if we do not address these challenges. So for all those reasons and more, this is not going to be a short-term challenge if we don't fix it. So yes, the Retrofit task force is part of that. The energy strategy is part of that too. But like I say, it is a two-sided problem. It's not just about the costs to households, it's also about how much households earn. And in South Yorkshire, our households do not earn enough. It's one of the reasons why we've been so badly affected by the cost of living crisis. So we need our families to earn more money so that we can pay for the things that we need them to pay for, so we're not in a cost of living crisis any longer. And that's about good jobs. And good jobs, in no small part, will come from a just transition to a renewable future. So we have the opportunity to create good green jobs in the energy industries of the future. And if we grasp that, then we don't just make our homes warmer and cheaper to heat. We also provide people with the jobs to pay for the heating bills that will inevitably come.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yeah, we've got a few. Should we start down here at the front? And then we can, we'll maybe take two at a time.
Yes, you read out a statement from the Conservative candidate about nuclear being part of the solution. And the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre is also developing smaller nuclear stations. What do the other candidates think about that, given the long lead time, the expense of nuclear and the lack of a satisfactory solution to dispose of the waste?
Thank you. And a second question, somewhere over here? Yeah.
That's surprising. People within South Yorkshire in private and social housing having the agonising choice between heating their homes and choosing when to eat. Will the candidates agree to a landlord charter which has a sort of definitive a charter with teeth that basically guarantees that people who are actually providing housing for people to rent actually is incumbent upon them providing the mechanisms by which they can insulate the homes in which they live?
Okay, thank you. We'll go to your question as well.
It was pretty much the same. How do you address landlords and retrofitting houses?
Great, thank you. Okay, so we've got a question about nuclear and candidates' thoughts on that and this Landlord Charter. Bex, I know you've said not only no fracking, but also no nuclear fission. So do you want to kick us off with that nuclear question and maybe touch on the second as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think being in the Green Party, what I love about it is that you can have differing of opinions, but ultimately, for me, nuclear is an absolute no-go. Mainly because of the time it will take to actually generate the energy that we need. And ultimately, there's no solution yet to the waste that it creates. Like, where do we put all the waste that it generates? So there's no solution for that right now. And if we're going to focus on energies, on trying to figure that out, we might as well shift our attention onto something completely different, which is the tried and tested solar energy, hydro energy. So I think nuclear is wasting our time, ultimately. That's how I feel about nuclear.
Great, and any thoughts on the Landlord Charter?
Yes, I have lots of thoughts on the Landlord Charter. I love that, a charter with teeth. What I think about that, it's very close to my heart because I have been in the position of having to choose not to eat in order to heat my home. So I know what that's like, and ultimately what we need to do is something that I'm trialling at the moment. So I'm renting at the moment, and actually my landlord is wonderful, but her home is drafty and needs insulating and it needs work. So I'm actually going to reach out to her and figure out how we actually get landlords to retrofit their homes. So I don't have the answer to that yet, but I'm in the position where I'm trying to get that answer. Like, what is it that we need? I don't know if it's a charter with teeth. It sounds good to me, but I don't know if that's the answer yet. So ultimately, I am absolutely finding that out, and then I'll feed that into the policies that we create.
Thank you. Does anyone else feel like they've got the answer already? Joe?
Yeah, so on nuclear, I think the answer to that is yes. We need nuclear, but it will take 10 years to get on stream, but we won't have fixed this in 10 years. And we will need an energy mix. The energy grid requires a mix of different sources. They have different characteristics of availability and whatnot. And if you try and do it all with renewables, you're going to have real problems. You need an awful lot of storage, and that would actually cost you a lot more than trying to do nuclear. So, yeah, absolutely, we need it. We need renewables, obviously, as well, and we can have that faster. Long-term storage, I don't agree that there isn't a satisfactory solution. The long-term geological storage works. It's fine. So we should absolutely do that. And even if it didn't work, right, we've got global warming to think about. And the idea that the theoretical problems with long-term nuclear storage is in any way comparable to the threat of global warming, I just think is ridiculous. I'm sorry if it's, I'm sorry, didn't mean to be offensive there, but you've got to weigh things according to how serious they are, and global warming is clearly the serious threat that we face. Landlord Charter is a great idea. It's largely not a policy available to metro mayors. There is some housing regulation of landlords available to local authorities. We could do that across South Yorkshire by working together, but really the teeth that you're going to want to have, you're going to need a policy from government. And it's something that our MPs have worked on, tenants' rights in general, the whole no fault eviction thing. We've worked on in Parliament, but that's where the decision needs to be.
Okay, Bex, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah,
nuclear point?
just on the nuclear point, I don't think it's as clear cut as the fact that yes, it takes time, but there are people out there that think that nuclear is a good way to go. Ultimately, you don't need to. It's not about the storing of the energy. It's about the amount of time that it takes to actually create it, and then where the waste goes. So the storage bit is not really anything to do with the storing of it.
On two things. One is we do need consistent energy supply. Nobody would argue with that, and it's very difficult on an exclusively renewable basis. There is things that we can do. We've just had an interconnector with Norway, so that we can bring hydro from Norway into the UK, which is really, really important. We ought to do more of that kind of thing, which would reduce the dependence on volatile wind and sun. And I think we do need to explore these micro nuclear power stations. You know, I'm old enough to remember Wedgie Bend not thinking that you wouldn't need to actually charge for it because it was an infinite amount of power and all this kind. You know, we need to have our eyes wide open, and these are not low-cost alternatives as well. They're about £1 billion each that they're looking at doing for a citywide one. But I think we need to very much explore it, being honest, but also look at the way we can connect with green energy elsewhere, including Scotland, which has a surplus of that, and we should be able to bring it down in the grid much more efficiently than we do at the moment. So, but nuclear power should be an option. On Landlord Charter, I was sat with people, social housing organisations yesterday that do 25,000 houses. And they're having massive pushback with people going on to energy efficient things like air source heat pumps, because it's an education thing. They run a lot cooler and people can't put their washing on there to dry them and all of this kind of stuff. So I think, you know, there is a lot we can do. And I think one of the practical things is make each landlord have to publish their EPC rating, so that at least you kind of know how thermally efficient the flat or house that you're renting is before you go anywhere near it. And I think that would drive the right standards. So it's a mixture of carrot and stick, and the carrot sadly will have to come probably from a higher being than the South Yorkshire Mayor. But I think within South Yorkshire there's quite a lot we can do to actually promote the good landlords and to decry the bad ones by using the powers that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver.
Yeah, on nuclear, I think we just need to tease out maybe some of the differences there, because I think you mentioned about the work going on at the AMRC, the AMP, and the work done out there on nuclear design technology, which does create jobs, and we are, you know, a centre of expertise for that. There is the capacity to create part of the nuclear industry at Forge Masters that doesn't exist anywhere else in the country. So there is an element of this which is about the design of facilities rather than just actually kind of creating nuclear facilities here in South Yorkshire, which, if it were going to happen, isn't going to happen for, well, quite some time. One of my frustrations with the government's energy strategy was that it was focused so solidly on things like nuclear, which aren't going to happen for another 10, 15, 20 years, and didn't pay enough attention to those things that we see are possible today, which are solar and wind, which are the most important things, and that's where anybody in South Yorkshire's focus should be. In terms of the question about landlords, I'm sorry, it's going to be a relatively similar answer. I'm really sorry, I'm afraid, but I wish we could do more in terms of the teeth. You know, in terms of having teeth, it would be brilliant. I think we all know that landlords, not exclusively, but some landlords are not brilliant, are not great. I've certainly experienced them. So yeah, we should be able to do more. One of the things I think mayors can do, which is Sadiq Khan's a good example of this, is through the soft power that the mayor has. Sadiq Khan has a landlord checker, for instance, where actually they do some work to find out whether or not you can put your landlord into a search that Sadiq has created on his website, and it shows you whether your landlord is a decent one or not. So I think things like that are possible, but I'm really sorry, I'm afraid it's probably not going to have the teeth that you or I would want it to.
Great, thank you. We're going to move on to our next theme now, which is transport. And transport accounts for a third of UK emissions, and to reach net zero, we need to decarbonise our transport sector. So the question for candidates is, if elected as Metro Mayor, what will you do to help people across South Yorkshire move from A to B in a way that is greener, cheaper and more convenient than they currently do? Again, over to the Conservative candidate's response. He said that it's rather ironic that after years of trying to force people onto buses, it will soon be greener to drive an electric car than use a diesel bus. We need to stop being so ideological about transport and allow people to use the form of transport that's best for them. That means providing an efficient bus network, but also using new technology to reduce congestion. Keeping traffic flowing reduces air pollution and increases bus productivity. We need to encourage car users to ditch older, more polluting vehicles in favour of newer, cleaner ones. While most of this needs to be encouraged by national government. It's within the powers of the mayoral combined authority to encourage good traffic flow, to reduce congestion and air pollution. In many cases, this is simply a matter of upgrading traffic lights, improving junctions. These are quick wins.
I can't believe no one's thought of that.
Why is nobody clapping? I don't understand.
So, Simon, I'll come to you first. You've promised miniature clean air zones around schools and more electric vehicle chargers installed across South Yorkshire. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who's got an EV, as I have, that's tried to use them in a normal way, will realise how the paucity of chargers that are out there. They are coming, but nowhere near as quickly as the cars that are coming on the road. So a real focus on that to make it accessible is very important. I think also, if you look at the cost of cars, they're really expensive, the majority, but there are some cheaper ones coming through now, and drawing people's attention to that, because these you can now get an EV for under £10,000, which is a modest price if you're going to renew your car, and highlighting that to people. In terms of, yes, clean air is a massively important thing. There's lots of people dying in South Yorkshire for polluted air. And I think if we could have around particularly vulnerable people having these clean air zones which are policed, stop people idling their cars while they're waiting, it is a particular bugbear of mine, and fine them. We have the power to do that. They're not enforced, and they need to be. There's also things like the vehicle-to-grid technology that's coming, where you can actually plug in your car into the house to actually use the energy from that and then recharge at a lower rate in the middle of the night. So there's a whole plethora of things you can do to make greener transport. But of course, one of the key things is to try and fight for cleaner public transport. I was down in London today, and it was a joy to walk down Gray's Inn Road, where I had a meeting at Royal Mail I had to go to. All the buses were electric already. All of the taxis are electric. They get £7 for every pound we get here, 7 times as much in terms of subsidy for public transport. And that's one of the things that we need. To get clean air, we need to have that kind of investment. And it's one of the things that I would absolutely focus on as South Yorkshire Mayor, is getting down there and shouting about in the corridors of power down in Westminster that this isn't right, it isn't fair. And we've got this, British feeling of fairness, and for far too long we've sat here as a Labour Party trying to do something and never getting away from it, never actually managing to pull it off. The latest being £430 million bid that we put in, and we were turned down, didn't get a penny. Something's wrong. Either it's bias in Westminster, in which case we call it out and we go into a judicial review on it, as Virgin did with trains and things like that. We can do the same. Or we're not answering the question that there's been posed for it. Either which way, it's not acceptable. And that's where you need a strong South Yorkshire Mayor to fight for the area, to get the kind of clean transport that we need in South Yorkshire. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Oliver, can we come to you?
Of course, can, yeah. Well, there's loads to talk about now, really. 36% of our carbon emissions come from transport. So it feels like a pretty obvious place to start. And it goes back to the thing that I said at the beginning of this, which is that this is not a technical challenge, it is a political challenge. Technically, we know how to move people around our region with lower emissions, be it through public transport, active travel, integrated transport, etc., or other means. But we know how to do it, but we've got to have the political will to get there. For me, that starts with public control of our public transport. So bringing the buses back under public control. It's not a panacea, right? It's not a panacea. It's not a silver bullet. It's not going to solve everything, but it's a start, and it gets us closer to the options of owning a fleet or delivering a fleet or having a fleet, got to be careful which words I use, which are lower emission, right? So public control of public transport is part of that solution, so people can get about our region without having to rely on a car, right, fundamentally. Integrated transport with active travel, so building on the plans and commitments that have already been made by Dan Jarvis, the Mayor of South Yorkshire. Most people I speak to have been pretty impressed by the work that Sarah Story and Pete Zanzatera did, so building on that and replacing our active travel commissioner, both of which are things that I've already committed to doing. And then thirdly, and I think this is maybe underappreciated sometimes when we talk about these things, it's about having more livable communities. So actually, you know, it's important that we are able to get about the region if we need to or want to, but actually, I'm really lucky. I live on Vexel Road. For me personally, I have everything I need within a 10 or 15-minute walk from where I am, by and large. For lots of people, it doesn't feel like that. So how do we create more livable communities so actually the need to travel is lower and people don't need to get on a bus even? So all of those things are really important. And then last but not least, yes, absolutely, we should have more electric vehicle charging points. It's really important that we have those. I just think that by and large, what we should be trying to encourage is people getting on the bus or walking or cycling across our region.
Great, Joe.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with what Oliver's saying, it has to be said, except that, I mean, yes, public control of the network. We were promised this 4 years ago at the previous election, and it took 3.5 years for the current mayor to start the process of taking public control of the network, and as a result, you know, we're years behind Greater Manchester in the process, and that's a tragedy. So we need to get on with that. If we take control of the public transport network, then we can at least start to make sure that the money we put into it to improve things like junctions and digital signs and whatnot, that money we put into it is actually an investment in the network, and that it's not going to be met by the bus companies turning around and taking money out, which is what they do at the moment. You know, we invest money and they take services away. The bus, I mean, I can talk about EV charging points. It's a good thing. Active travel, it's a good thing. We need to join up our cycle network, for example. We talk about the 15-minute neighbourhoods. Again, I mentioned them before. Planning policy to make sure, you know, to give us communities that have things on hand. I could talk about all that, but actually, I'm going to go back to buses, because buses is the main thing that a South Yorkshire mayor has always had the powers to do. You know, Dan Jarvis had one job, and that was the buses, and he didn't do it. Well, sorry, he had two jobs, didn't he? He had two jobs. But his job here was the buses, and he didn't do it. So the problem we've got, we can take control of the network, we can make some improvements, but it does need money. It does need money. And yes, the South Yorkshire didn't get the money it applied for from the government. West Yorkshire did, Greater Manchester did, York did. All these other places got money. And they're not all Conservative voting places by any means. Not any of them, I don't think. So there's a reason South Yorkshire didn't get it, and that's what we need to put right. But the thing that worries me most is that unless people get back on the buses to pre-pandemic levels, and they haven't yet, and they may not ever, unless that happens, it's going to be difficult even to sustain the bus network we have at the moment. Unless there's extra money to prop it up, which there might be, there has been, but that money comes to an end now, then we're going to see loss of service on the buses, and that's going to have a downward spiral that fewer people will get it because it's even less reliable and even less frequent. And that's, again, there has to be a policy change, and there has to be a policy change in the government to say, look, we recognise we've got net zero targets, we've signed up to them, we recognise that actually public transport in all of our cities, in all of our communities, is an essential part of that, and there has to be money put into it, because otherwise it's not going to happen.
Thanks, Oliver.
Yeah, can I just come back? Sorry, I realise there's this sort of like language bandied about the Labour Council's Dan Jarvis applying for £435 million from the government and not getting a penny, and somehow that's our fault, right? The government, Boris Johnson, when he announced the Bus Back Better plan, said that there would be £3 billion in that pot of money. When it came to be announced, there was actually £1.2 billion in that pot of money. Joe mentions that other regions did better than we did. Merseyside applied for £663 million worth of money and got £12.3 million, right? when this government say that they want to support our public transport networks, they don't mean it. They simply don't mean it. To say that our strategy wasn't ambitious when we were asking for nearly £500 million to fund things like subsidised elder persons travel, free travel for younger people, massively upgrading our infrastructure when it comes to bus stops, etc. It was hugely ambitious. The fact is, this government overpromise and underdeliver, and that isn't down to the Labour Party or Dan Jarvis, that's down to Boris Johnson and the Tories. I'm really sorry, but it is.
And what's the solution to that, Oliver? What can you do as Mayor?
Well, absolutely, you can build a better campaign. That's absolutely true. So being absolutely vociferous on the idea that we need to bring our buses back under public control and showing the government in London that what we want here for our future should be in our control. Right? The whole point of devolution is supposed to be that we get to decide what we want for our own future. That's supposed to be the whole point of it. And yet half the time, the question that most often gets asked is, what is the government going to give to us? I really want to try and reject that question. What do we want? What do we want for our future? Right? And the next mayor, whoever it is, should be solely focused on that single question. And that's absolutely what I'd do.
Thanks, Oliver. Bex, what about you?
Lovely, thank you. On transport, I mean, like Oliver said, there's a lot to say. So I'm just going to take a slightly different take on this because when I read through the IPCC, it said that there are 54% of people that have been polled by the Green Alliance. Thank you very much for doing that poll. So the poll that the UK cannot afford not to implement policies intended to address climate change, okay? So that is definitely around transport. So what I want to pose is, if you want green policies, then vote for green policies. And ultimately, changing our transport system and giving it a complete overhaul and making it completely integrated and green and clean is green policy. So that I would urge you all to think about what we stand for as a Green Party and vote for something a little bit different.
Thanks, Bex. Okay, we are running a little low on time, but do we have any questions on transport? So we've got one at the back, we've got an online question, and one at the front here. Is there another mic?
You can shout if you
Yeah, go for it. Thank
Cool.
you. Yeah.
I've written it down, so I'll just read it. So, to me, green public transport is one of those, public transport that is plentiful, affordable, and accessible, is one of those policies that works for climate and works for social and economic justice too, because it benefits the poorest and most marginalised in society. I think it's quite telling, and it says something about, who is represented in politics, that we've got more mayoral candidates from Door than we have, candidates of colour. I was just wondering if all candidates would comment on their plans for social and economic justice and how their transport plans would work towards this.
Great, Aaron.
We have Lucinda from the online audience. So how will the candidates ensure public transport is prioritised as an affordable option for everyone, before shutting down roads, charging to drive through town, etc., in order to discourage car use whilst not affecting those who can least afford the charges?
Thank you. And then I think we had one at the front here. And then maybe we could take our youth question as well.
Thank you. This is kind of cruel, but it's really important. It's really, really hard to get money out of central government, and you've basically skirted the question. Like, I'm desperate to know, how can you actually get central government to give you sufficient funding so we really can have the decent public transport system that we absolutely need? It's vital. How are you going to get that money? Thank you.
Thank you. And then our youth question.
So this question again comes from the young people at RICA, and they ask how you plan to spend the 570 million from the CRCS fund, and they're specifically interested in the focus on spending for young people.
Great. A wealth of interesting questions there. So we've had one on social and economic justice, affordability of transport, how are we going to get the funding from central government for transport and the CRCS fund, and how that could be spent on young people? So, Joe, you're the only one not scribbling away, so
No.
does that mean you've got a fully formed answer?
No, it doesn't. Sorry, what is the CRCS fund?
According to the Sheffield Star, the CRCS fund is the Comprehensive Spending Review, I believe.
Maybe we could ask how funding for transport can support young people getting from A to B.
Thank you. Yes, I much prefer that question. So, I 4 questions out. I'm sure I can do them all justice. Yeah, I represent Dore. I can't afford to live there. I mean, so I don't know who else is from Dore here, but yeah, if that was me, then no. I live in Fulwood, which is still kind of the nice end of town, isn't it? I suppose. I think the point of affordability is well made. If we have public control of buses, then we can do an awful lot on affordability. At the moment, it's entirely in the gift of the bus operators. So if we have public control, we can do sensible things with tickets. Like, rather than there being 40 or 50 different tickets potentially you could buy, and some of them quite expensive, and some of them not the right one, not right value. And rather than having to get 2 tickets if your journey involves 2 buses, you could have 1 ticket. And so there are ways of making the bus network more affordable, because we're treating it we're doing it. We want to do it so that it serves the public policy goals of buses, of getting people around, of creating opportunities for access, and not serving, merely the interests of the bus companies, which is what they're going to do, and I don't blame them for it, but that's not what we want. How to get money out of government is well, if we had the answer to that, then we would have the money, wouldn't we? But I would say one thing, and that is, it's very easy with a panel like this and with an audience, of people who are keen on all the good things that we're keen on in terms of environment and social justice and so on, to look at the Conservatives and think, well, they're just rotten people, and there's no point, and the only option is to defeat them at the next election, and until then we're treading water. And I think that's a mistake. There are things they're interested in, and there are ways to talk to them to get them to take an interest and to fund certain projects. And the coalition is full of examples of this. I mean, we got the park and ride at Untitled Station under the coalition, I remember, in my ward. But actually, more seriously, more generally, the whole green crap, the whole investment in renewable energy, that was coalition policy, and that tripled renewable generation. And it was done using energy market reforms, and they quite liked the sound of that. But I don't care that it was energy market reforms rather than some kind of tax and spend or whatever. It did the job. It got that renewable energy built. So there are ways to talk to them. And I think specifically the city region is all about, and I'm sorry I'm dwelling on this question, but it is the really interesting one. The city region concept in its origin was about economic regeneration. It was, today it's called levelling up. And 5 years ago it was called Northern Powerhouse. But 10 years ago it was called City Deals and, and developing economic levers to local areas, to economic geographies, was the jargon, because that's where decisions have been made best for economic regeneration. And if we remember that was the goal of the policy, and that the Conservatives are interested in doing that, then you can pitch to them in a way that might tick the boxes, and you might get the funding.
Thanks, Joe. Oliver?
Yeah, sorry, I can't let it go. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. As somebody that ran against Nick Clegg in 2015, I think the problem was that the Lib Dems were all too good at talking to the Tory government, in my opinion, personally. Right? There is absolutely I'll put that on my next leaflet. Too good at talking to the Tory government. Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, sorry, it's Alison, isn't it? Alison. Listen, I know you're a Green Party person. You're not necessarily going to like the answer, but to a certain extent, maybe some the long-term solution to this is having a Labour government, frankly, because this government are never going to invest in our region, in our communities, to the extent that we would like, right? And you say I skirted the question. I don't think I did skirt the question. I said that what we need to do is build a better campaign in order to bring more money to our region, and whether we like it or not, the only thing that is going to make a difference to this government in the long run is a better campaign and more pressure put on them politically. We heard the idea about a judicial review for instance, the decision taken around transport. Judicial review is to make sure that the government took the decision legally. I have no doubt they took the decision legally. The fact is they took the wrong decision for our communities, and the only people that will take the right decision for our communities, as far as I'm concerned, I appreciate you will have a different view, is a Labour government. In terms of the question around equalities, essentially, I've said in the manifesto already that what we need to do is have more use of equalities assessments for the impacts of decisions taken by the Mayor's office, and I think transport is one of those areas where that's really important. In terms of young people, frankly, ask young people, right, what do young people want to see that money spent on? And I think we should have that conversation. I've already said, and I've not mentioned it this evening, that we should have citizens' assembly, a citizens' assembly for climate. At the heart of my plan is asking people what they want and how we should transition to a net zero economy. It shouldn't be done to people, it has to be done with people, and that starts with asking questions of people who are going to be most affected. And then last but not least, it was about affordability, and again, I think that comes back to public control of our public transport network. It's not a silver bullet, it doesn't solve everything, but it means that what we can do, as in London, is hold down fares in a more equal and just way.
Thanks, Oliver. Simon.
Well, I can answer how we get the money out of central government. And the reason I'm standing for the Yorkshire Party is that we are there to have a devolved Yorkshire Parliament. That is the only way. That's the way it's worked in Scotland, and we've got more people in Yorkshire than in Scotland. It's the way it worked in Wales. It's the way it works in the Northern Ireland, that even though they have political issues with Stormont, they still get an awful lot more than we do up here. And the only way you do it is having political clout, and we've got none. You know, it's all well and good, you know, Oliver saying that, you know, we need to campaign, but they've been in power forever up here. And I would talk as an ex-Labour member. You know, really, they've had every chance to actually entreat the central government to actually do the right thing, and we end up with us getting £1 for every £7 that are down there. The truth is, we're never going to get the money that we need up here unless we change the rules of the game. And there is nobody in Scotland that comes back and says, I'll tell you what, I wish we were ruled by Westminster still. You know, that never happens. So, you know, getting it on the political agenda and getting me as mayor, I will be the only person in an English regional party to actually be in a senior position of power if I get this. It will be a huge step in that right direction for a devolved Yorkshire Parliament. And that's the only way we can actually be in charge of the £163 billion economy that is Yorkshire. And it's a well-balanced economy that we need to have the right focus, not down in Westminster. You know, people in Westminster index everything around Westminster and their metropolitan power that they have down there. So we need to change the game, otherwise we're going to be sitting here in 4 years saying exactly the same things that we did now. So that's why, for me, if you'd be so kind to vote for the Yorkshire Party, that is a step in the right direction to rebalance the chances of us getting the money that we need to have the society that we need up here.
Okay, Oliver's going to come back and then I'll come to Beth.
I just had a question, which was, if a better campaign and more political pressure does not lead to the government giving us more money in our region, how does a better campaign and more political pressure lead to us getting a Yorkshire Parliament?
It's a completely different position. If you're basically bidding for pots of money, and you're very bad at it.
Yeah.
If you change it so that you have a devolved budget, like Scotland does, you choose whether you want to have NHS car parks free. You choose whether you want right to roam in the countryside. You choose whether you want to give students free tuition. You're empowered, it's called.
How do we get it?
You make the case for...
A campaign.
You make a case for a different political structure.
Bex,
you don't bang your head against the same brick wall.
Can we have your response on the
One, because I think this, what we've got at this table is absolutely what's demonstrated as part of the problem, if I'm completely honest. I am all about being loud, proud and kind. You have to be in it to change it. So I'm proud of where I live indoor, Totley Rise now. I've been forced into positions like that. I was brought up in Winkerbank, and there's this massive sort of postcode prejudice through all of it. And you do have to be in it to change it. That's why I've stood to be a South Yorkshire mayor, with the only way to tackle that is to have conversations, not consultation. You have to understand what prejudice people face in order to address it. And I don't think enough of that happens. I think too much fighting about how we campaign things goes on. And actually, we just need to be much more kinder about how we deal with people.
Thanks, Bex. So we are running over a little bit, but we do have one theme left. So the way I'm going to do this is we'll go straight to questions from the audience, if there are any, and then we'll go on to our closing comments, but quick, snappy answers would be great from the candidates. So the last theme is around the environment, and our kind of main question is, how will candidates protect the region from the negative impacts of a warmer world, such as increased flooding, and what plans do you have to protect and restore nature across the region? Before we dive in, do we have any questions from the audience on nature restoration at the front here? And could you say your name if you're asking a question as well?
Hello, it's Heather Hunt, and I'm in the Green New Deal, South Yorkshire. So our region has moorland and bogs, which should be carbon sinks, and agricultural land currently emitting carbon, and all are biodiversity deserts. Climate impacts, particularly flooding, will become increasingly severe and stressful for both people and nature. So if you become mayor, what steps will you take to ensure a major programme for nature recovery and climate action? And how are they to be prioritised, interconnected, and lead to good green jobs? And how will you do this without waiting for mainstream government funding?
Back to that old nugget again. I think we had a question at the front here, is that right? Yeah. Oh, is it the same question? Great. Brilliant. Anything else? Maybe the youth question? And then we'll hand back to the candidates.
Thanks. So another question from Rika. What they're really interested about in particular is flooding. And so what they'd like to know is that how you will engage with communities around flooding to inspire and empower further climate action within those communities, but also address the communities that are affected by flooding as well.
Great, thank you, Rosie. So Oliver, you have said you want to plant 1.4 million more trees.
Not personally, but...
I thought that was personally, which is one for every person in South Yorkshire, I believe. So yeah, expanding your plans for nature restoration, including bogs and, well, a programme for nature recovery, climate action, and then also any thoughts on flooding prevention.
Thank you. And this is fundamentally important because all too often we get caught up in this conversation about emissions. And emissions are obviously important and we need to bring them down, but this is also about nature recovery and the biodiversity loss that we've already seen. So we need to be really ambitious in that area. I've already said, please do have a look at the manifesto that we put out, that we need to have an ambitious plan for nature recovery, and that includes 1.4 million trees, but it also includes working with partners like the Wildlife Trust to make sure that that plan is sufficiently ambitious and that we have targets in there that are agreed as something that we can try and achieve. So working with partners is part of that solution. The people in this room, I'm sure, will know that the MCA recently became responsible for delivering that nature recovery strategy, so it's something that the next mayor is going to have a lot of influence over, which I think is fantastic. In terms of flooding and how we do that properly, well, I've already mentioned about climate assemblies, and I think that's part of it, and it's about a new way of doing politics. I've said from the beginning of my campaign that I want to try and do politics differently, and that's about consultation, which is a word which sort of sends shivers down my spine when you think about the way that it's sometimes done. But I think in terms of engaging with communities to listen and learn from about what they want. When it comes to flooding, there is the Connected by Water scheme, which I think is fantastic, which hits some of the goals that we've already talked about in terms of nature recovery, and is something that we are already on with. Flooding is one of those areas in terms of climate mitigation it's only going to get worse, sadly. So I know you want me to say that I'm going to be able to do this potentially with no government investment, but it will take investment from central government, and we do have to make sure that we get that, but then we have to use it effectively in ways that our local communities want from us. Was there a question I've missed?
No, I think you answered them all.
Okay, all right. In which case that will be my pithy answer.
Great, Bex.
Thank you. Heather, really great question and really important. I think that how we sort of encourage active travel and get things moving without the need for the government funding is actually to cut some of the funding that we've got out there already, such as road expansion. So there's a pot of money that goes into road expansion at the moment. We could use some of that money and distribute it somewhere else. So ultimately, it's about changing the way that we use the money that we've already got in order to promote more active travel and taking those steps that are needed. I think, Oliver, you take my lead on the sort of conversation. It's about, rather than that consultation that needs to happen, it is more that conversation, changing it to actually engaging with people and seeing, you know, what do you see? How do you see that working? And if we can actually bring that in. There might be some bright spark out there that's got an idea that we haven't actually thought of, which would be nice. And as far as flooding and green spaces, what I think we could do is actually take the, when we look at building the integrated transport network, is actually working in partnership again with green spaces, because they're already doing a lot in the centre of Sheffield. And through partnering with them, creating flood defences with that, as well as beautifying the city. A lot of that, what I would love to see is more infrastructure around the expanding active travel, basically, so you've got more space for cycling as well as walking, and having it all interconnected. Now, the Sheffield Transport Group are actually launching a whole website around a vision around that, which is absolutely beautiful, so I implore you all to go and research that. It's being launched next week, so if you want to see how it could look differently and sort of giving it a whole overhaul, then that is definitely the place to look.
Okay, Simon, should we come to you next?
Yeah, I mean, rewilding is a big passion of mine at a personal level. I do it myself. And I think at a wider level, we should have community-based initiatives. If you look in even countries that you would not naturally think as paragons of biodiversity, but in China, for example, every kilometre of every river in China has a river warden. And that warden's responsibility is to make sure that the banks are kept clean of litter and also measure the water quality. And these are all volunteers. I think there's an awareness post-COVID. You know, we all realise the value of walking in nature, of being in nature. And I think we've got an upswell of understanding of the mental and physical well-being that we get from being out there. So that'd be something I'd want to bring into South Yorkshire to make it so that people can adopt, I think, be countryside champions and help them to nurture the local environment, the hedgerows that we've got, and stop things like, the curbs being mowed so frequently, because there's a huge amount of biodiversity in there that we can do. So really measure the stuff that we've got now, the actual, I think it's something like 8% of the urban area is grassy verges, but we don't actually curate them in as little wildlife havens, which we could do, and I think we should do. Even things like bus shelters, having, if you go to Utrecht, they have a wildlife garden on top. These are things that we can do. These don't cost a lot of money. And there's a great opportunity to work in urban areas, but also, going back to the flooding question, with the agricultural and the rural community. A lot of these, the upstream of where flooding comes from, there's a lot we can do up there, both in terms of rewilding and also in terms of holding the water more effectively than we've done before. And we haven't really looked into that in South Yorkshire. So it's working in partnership with local communities and with all sections of society, the rural and urban, to bring nature to the fore and to bring people in touch with nature. Because if you're in touch with nature, it actually does help you as an individual, and of course it helps our community. And it's a very real passion of mine.
Simon, Joe.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I agree with what's been said. So just let me add a couple of things. I think we could appreciate the biodiversity in urban areas better. There's a lot of biodiversity in gardens and in green spaces and wild spaces between the houses, and with a bit of work we can kind of connect that up better. We can make that more effective, and if we value it, obviously we can act to enhance it and preserve it. So that's the first thing. The second thing I want to add is on the flooding. Now there's different ways of going about flooding. I wish I could remember the name of the town.
Whaley Bridge?
Could have been. They had a big flooding problem, and they said, well, the answer is, build lots of concrete walls for the middle of your village, and it'll cost N million pounds. And they went and said, well, we don't want to do that, because it'll be hideous. And they went away and found upstream ways of slowing the water down. I think Simon was alluding to it. Much more ecological, much less intrusive in the village, and it delayed the water coming into the village, and it was just as effective. So some of the recent work in Sheffield has been not just concrete, but it's started to go in the direction of kind of smarter ways of flood management. We still got, in 2019 floods, we still got Doncaster saying to Sheffield, look, you've sent all this, all your new flood defences are sending us this water, causing our floods. That's the nature of the thing. It's Sheffield Council and Doncaster Council are not responsible for each other's patches. Maybe the city region mayor has a role there in kind of bringing everybody together and working out solutions that work for everyone.
Great. Thank you. Well, we're going to bring this evening to a close. So I'm going to invite all the candidates just to give some closing remarks in less than a minute, if possible. So we'll start with Simon and go down the line.
In less than a minute, all I'd like to say is, of course, we all have the climate crisis at the forefront of our mind. I think I'll speak on behalf of all of us. So there's nobody here that's a denier. It's about how you go about making the changes that we need to make in an economically sustainable way, and including everybody in society in doing it, and giving this area a huge opportunity. And I do genuinely believe there is a huge green economy opportunity for South Yorkshire, and I want to see this area as being nationally and internationally recognised as a renaissance area in the green economy over the next 4 years. Thank you.
So I just want to say thank you for everybody who's come and everybody who's participated. It's really important to have meetings like this. I would just want to say, I suppose my summary is, I'm actually quite optimistic that this is all doable. That we are going to get some warming. We are going to face some climate risks. That's kind of inevitable. But there's enough momentum now to do what's necessary to keep the war, I want to say keep it below a dangerous level, keep it at a level which is not going to lead to the kind of the worst predictions that we hear about and that people are worried about. I'm really worried that there are young people who are despairing, who are saying, I give up, it's never going to work, having terrible anxiety. And I don't think that's right. It's not justified and it's not helpful. And so I'm so pleased we've got kind of a hope for the future theme here, which is the right attitude, and it's going to be the most effective attitude at bringing people with us to do something about climate change. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you. Again, thank you to everybody that's come, and the organisers as well, who don't often get enough credit for putting on these sorts of things. It is a massive challenge, kind of coordinating all this stuff between all the different candidates and everything, so thank you for putting them on and giving us the chance to talk to you guys. I guess I'd start where I'd finish where I started, which is to say, this isn't just about why, this is about how. How do we get there? And I think we've heard some good ideas, and as Simon says, I think we agree on more than we disagree on. But the thing that I always come back to is, and the phrase that I can't get out of my head is Greta Thunberg when she said, we have to act like the house is on fire because the house is on fire, right? So, I think whoever the next mayor is, bar potentially our Tory friend, I do think that we're in a better place where the next person to take the office is going to take this challenge on with the seriousness that it deserves. But it isn't just a challenge, it is also an opportunity, and the next mayor should be focused on that too, and that's exactly what I intend to do.
Thanks, Oliver. Bex.
Lovely. Again, a big thank you, Sarah. Thank you, the whole team. Thank you. And thank you for being here as well. It's really important. I know I'm echoing what people have said, but genuinely, it's really important to get people together to talk about this. I want to implore you, if you are one of the 54% of people who need to have climate action and climate responsibility and climate policies put on the table, then please use your vote to vote green. I care passionately about the planet and the people in it. And I've got experience of making change happen. You haven't seen that yet. I have that in my bones. And I can make change happen. So please vote for me.
Thank you, Bex. Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, in person and online as well, for joining us this evening. And thank you to all the candidates for all of your answers. And thank you especially to the team at Hope for the Future and Green Alliance who have pulled off the event tonight.